everybody. Welcome back to Old War Legends, where we focus on growing the community. I'm your host, Mike, and with me, as always, is Evan.
Lone characters run around by themselves. They're a menace. I think they should be outlawed. Everyone should have to join a unit. Go back to the old ways.
No, it's good to have both. So we're continuing our beginner series. We're walking through some of the core rules, helping out players who haven't gone through the whole rule book, maybe haven't played a ton of game, or maybe some veterans who refresher. So last episode, or we just talked about diving into characters, and this time we're going to dive into specifically what is a lone character and how do those rules work.
Okay, so a lone character is an infantry or a cavalry unit type model, and this includes monsters.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you're a Doom Bull or if you're an Ogre Tyrant, you get to be a lone character.
Mhm.
It is also a character who is running around by themselves. They are not joined to a unit. So when they're by themselves, if they are also you're not a lone character when you're joined to a skirmish unit. You're part of the unit, part of the ship, part of the crew. Obligatory Pirates of the Caribbean reference. So if
Always
you're
important.
okay, so if you're a lone character, you get some very 9th edition 40k protections, and that's a good quality of life rule, even if it does add some complexity. And the reason for that is because you never used to see I'm going to have a wizard and I'm standing next to my unit, and unless if you were having photos taken for White Dwarf, you didn't see that because there was no
It's too
reason
dangerous.
to just stand next to a unit 2 inches away without being like, okay, I'm just going to fire a cannonball at you or a fireball at you, and you have 3 wounds and you're toughness 4, like you're dead. Like you're
Or
just
so
boned.
many other things. You were just way too vulnerable. So in this edition, they
Yeah.
actually have a really good set of character protection rules under the lone character section here. So we see all the time a character that is running around by themselves, and it actually feels pretty good.
Yeah. So here's the rules that help support the idea that you might actually have, like, for a really clear example is I'm a wizard, I'm on foot, I'm just trying to
Mhm.
cast some spells. Please don't touch me. I'm going to stand next to some archers, but I'm not going to join them because I want to be able to see 360, right?
So seeing through 60. So that's one example of
Yes.
why a wizard, for instance, would want to be not the unit, because if they're not the unit, they could see they're skirmishing and they can
Yes.
360 to cast their spells. Kind of helpful when you're trying to cast any kind of spell, right?
Well, in
Versus if you're in the
particular,
unit.
yeah, but in particular, Mike, you're trying to cast an enchantment or a hex, which you can only cast in your arc of vision, which is not your line of
Correct.
sight. It's your arc of vision. And if you're in a
Yep.
unit, your arc of vision is 90 degrees only in front of you. So you can only cast Plague Rust on things right in front of you. If somebody
Right.
ran up
So
beside you,
super restrictive.
yeah, and remember, you cast those spells before you move at all. So if you're joined to a unit, or if you're a wizard mounted on a dragon, the other person had to end their turn within range and within line of, or within arc of sight of your wizard
Mhm.
to be able to be cast Midas Barrage, Plague Rust, blah blah blah, any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Right, but if you're in a skirmishing lone wizard character, great. They're now 360, so there is no I'm going to fly next to you and you can't cast on me
Mhm.
anymore, right?
Yep. So that's definitely some good reasons for casters why you
Yeah.
might not want to be in a unit. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Another thing would be, let's say you are a ranged character who had a ranged weapon. A reason why you wouldn't want to be in the unit is like so you could shoot a different target, right? Because if you're part of the unit, you have to shoot the same target. So that'd be a reason why you wouldn't want to be in the unit if you're a character with a cool ranged weapon. Or if you're a melee character, maybe you don't want to necessarily charge what that unit is charging, or you want to watch the rear because you could 360 see and charge something else. So there's actually a whole depth of strategic reasons when you're playing the game. Sometimes you really do want to be in the unit for that extra buff, for the hit harder in combat, to make sure if the enemy charges your unit, they're attacking your character too, right? So they have to deal with both. And sometimes you want to be outside of the unit, and you're not stuck in the unit the entire game. Actually, the rule set lets you join and leave units, doesn't it?
Yeah, so you can join or leave units during the remaining moves phase. We'll get to that part. Importantly, you can't join or leave units in any other phase. You can't like use reserve move to leave a unit. It has to be during the specific phase.
Yep.
Anyway, so
So that's just kind of an overview. So
yeah.
let's go through this. We
And
just wanted to give you a whole
interestingly
bunch of
enough,
reasons
yeah, that's
why
not
you
actually
might
the
care.
order that they give us. Here's the first thing they
No.
tell us about. So first of all, they tell you,
Okay.
you're going to be a skirmisher, which has all kinds of implications from the skirmish page, and it has all kinds of implications for characters. Like Doom Seekers very often run around by themselves because they're skirmishers, because they get to charge 360, they have impact hits. It's great
Yep.
because if you only had that weird arc of sight, you'd have all these Doom Seekers that are like, oh, you ran next to me and now I can't go after you. Right? Which is annoying.
Not fun.
Okay, so you get to evade. So evasion is essentially something people forget about all the time. If
All the time.
these correlers were charging in and fighting these goblins over here, and then they overran because they killed all of this stuff, and they were overrunning this way to the right. I don't think my mouse is showing up. Here we go. Yeah, so overrunning here to the right, this goblin here could evade or take an evade test, which is where you roll a die and you take compare against your initiative, just like any other characteristic test. Characteristic tests were covered in this book, even though it barely ever happens. What happens is you roll a single die, you compare against your stat, and you have to be equal or lower than it. So if the goblin has initiative 3, you have to roll initiative 3 or less to pass the test. If you pass your test, you can move up to your full movement value out of the way of whatever unit was just overrunning into you.
Mm-hmm. Now, Evan, if you're charging me, can I use evade during you charging me?
Not from a charge. So that you still have a charge
Nope.
reaction as a lone character unit. You just take your reaction. You can flee as a reaction if you want to.
Right.
But this is trying to protect this goblin who's hanging out behind these goblins here from being overran or pursued into by an enemy unit because they were sitting around by themselves, and that would happen very often if you were not able to like just jump out of the way.
You would keep popping the characters as you would steamroll through things. So that's this rule is very powerful, but specific to a pursuit maneuver that happens. Pursuits happen after combat resolution if one side falls back in good order or flees. So this is specifically to not keep this bumper boom 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 of you blast through a unit and then you blast through the character. But it's not a guarantee. You have to pass that test.
And even an elf with initiative 5 or whatever can still fail if you roll a 6, because you always fail a character's test on the roll of a 6. This is a critical rule for, I have an undead, I've got a Hierophant, is running around by himself, and the only reason I can risk doing that is because if my skeletons in front of me all get blown up or crumble to death, and you overrun, I have a chance to jump out of the way. If you didn't have an evade test, your Hierophant would have to take a mount or have to hide in a unit, because risking someone overrunning into him would be
options.
It basically, this rule exists so that you can run wizards around by themselves, because if it didn't, you'd be screwed.
Okay. So this is just one example. There are layers of rules here that enable lone characters to exist in the game with some reliability. Not a guarantee, but pretty reliable that we see them on the table, which is what we want to see. So it's a good rule.
Okay, here's the next one. How come all these correlers don't just shoot all their crossbows into this one little goblin right here, this wizard, and ignore all the ones in front of them? Well,
that would be really mean, first of all, shooting my goblin. But, besides that.
And this goblin only got 2 or 3 wounds or whatever, so, when this whole unit in front of him has got 15, right?
That's probably 2 wounds.
Yeah.
We're just goblins.
Okay, so you can't target a lone character if there is a friendly unit that is closer to the target and is within 3 inches of that unit of the same type. So this goblin's on foot, he has unit type infantry, the goblins in front of him, the goblin spearmen are also unit type infantry, they are also closer to the correlers than the enemy, therefore the goblin wizard cannot be targeted.
There's one more criteria. What's the one more criteria?
The goblins have to be unit strength 5 or more.
Not unit strength.
No, 5 or more models, actually.
People get this wrong all the time because unit strength is used for most of the rules in the game. I'd say 80% of the rules will use unit strength, but there are 20%. This is one of them. It's individual models. And you're like, well, it doesn't matter with goblin. It's the same thing. Whatever, no problem. It's just
but when you have
5
trolls,
or more goblins, easy. But now if you start talking about trolls or monstrous cavalry or some other situations like that, suddenly like dragon ogres, right? Having 5 or more models is incredibly hard to have because they're very costly. So that's why the smaller infantry or even cavalry having 5 or more models, no problem. It's models. It's not unit strength.
Yeah, and this came up last year. I was playing against a guy who's playing Warriors of Chaos. He had only been playing for a little while. He had an army that was all Dragon Ogres, and there was 1 unit of Chaos Knights as a core unit. And then he had a wizard on a horse. Now, this wizard on a horse was hiding next to some Dragon Ogres who only had 3 models in that unit, so he was not getting lone character protection. I was like, you realize I can shoot at you unless if you go join that unit of cavalry, right? And this is something that people will make the mistake of, and you really need to have that level of, kindness to your opponent. Be like, look, you are making a mistake. This is the mistake you're making. And you're probably assuming it's unit strength when it's actually models. And this is a big critical component to the game where if you want to have those lone wizards running around shooting 4 fireballs a turn, Cool. You got to buy some infantry for them to hang out next to, or some Marauder horsemen, for example, because otherwise you just get shot too, and that's how it works.
Yep.
So sometimes
And,
the most important thing these goblins can do is protect the wizard from getting shot at. That's what they're doing, and that's perfectly viable as a job for them to do.
It's totally worse. So sometimes you take the unit, whether it's infantry or cavalry, to be a bunker, which is a term that people will use if you put the character in the unit, right?
Yeah.
But they're also very valuable to support the lone character outside the unit so that they're not going to get shot. Because soon as there's less than 5 models, oh boys, everyone going to shoot all their guns and cannons and catapults and everything at that character if they're not protected by the unit. So 5 or more models.
And this worked great until Sky Lanterns were invented, where the Sky Lantern moves up, does a bombing run on these goblins. Well, I just want to point this out because this will catch someone out like crazy. Sky Lantern moves up. It does a bombing run on the goblins. It kills 12 of them, or let's say it kills 9 of them. They fail their panic test and flee away. Now the Sky Lantern in the shooting phase can use all of its Dragon Fire Bombs against the wizard because no one is closer anymore. So the goblins are now not protecting him anymore, and he can just get zapped to death, right?
Yep.
Okay.
You're not wrong. At the same time, there are other examples where you can still snipe out a character.
Yeah.
Let's say I have a wizard on a Pegasus, right? Or a wizard who's on a flying carpet, right? Or something. You could fly over that unit, or just get closer. Or I'm on a fast cavalry model, and I could zip over there. If I'm able to still cast my spell because I didn't march, then as long as the character is now the closest target, that unit protection doesn't work. So it is very effective, but if you have a fast moving character or unit that has a ranged attack or ability, you could still move in the movement phase, get to that being the closer thing, and attack them that way. So positioning. The movement phase is the most critical phase in this game.
Okay, so in the example diagram here, the Corralers can fire at this orc boss because he is not, because he is the closer of the 2 units from the goblins.
It's okay, he could take it.
Yeah, so they could fire at him. They can also fire at the orc all the way in the back because even though he's not the closest target, he's not within 3 inches of the goblins, so they don't get to body block for him. So the only character that is protected here is the Goblin Shaman.
You got it.
Okay. So characters and units. Characters can join units. Wow.
That's kind of important to this game.
Yeah, and so as much as they're trying to create these rules for lone characters running around by themselves, in many cases, you want to join a unit because, for example, let's say you're a Chaos Sorcerer, and you've got the Marcus Inch, and the unit you're in has Marcus Inch, so they're giving you that +1 to cast bonus, and so that's a good reason to join the unit. Another reason is because you want to cast a spell like Demonic Vessel, which is range self, and would affect the unit that you're then joining. Right?
Or my melee character is joining a unit because he's just adding that extra oomph. So when they get into combat, hopefully they'll tip the battle in their favor by having those few extra additional character attacks that will make the unit hit that much harder. So there are many, many reasons why characters to be in units. I'd say, unless a character is on a mount, a monstrous mount or something, they are more often in units than there are lone characters. But again, depends on the armor you're playing, depends on the strategy, depends on the units you're bringing to the table. It is very hard with all these 17 factions and so many different army compositions and arcane journals to say, oh, this is the way to, this is the only way to play this, this is the best way to play it. That's just not true in this game. This game has so much depth and so much creativity and variety. So it supports both.
Okay, so you can either join a unit when you're deploying, and characters always deploy last, so all the units are already on the table, by being placed in that unit, or during the remaining moves phase, if you move into base contact with that unit that's not engaged in combat or fleeing, you can then join them. So if they're in combat, you can't join them. You have to go charge the same target, and then you aren't actually in them, but you do get to kind of fight it or whatever. The unit can't move after being joined by a character. So basically, the unit moves first, and then the character moves into base with them, and then they're set. Or if the unit doesn't move at all, then the character joins them, right?
Yep. Now, when you're deploying the character during the deployment phase, do you deploy the character at the same time you're deploying the unit?
No, because we'll talk about deployment later. But yeah, when you deploy, all the characters all deploy at the same time, but they don't. They deploy after all your units go down. Which, in the case of many people, they will have planned out. Okay, this character always joins my unit. I've got this Infernal Seneschal. he's always going to join my Infernal Ironsworn. So my Infernal Ironsworn brick has a nice little hole in it right in the middle where my character's going to go. And oh boy, what a surprise, he joins that unit in this exact spot, right?
Yep. So, and it's also just often that people already know this character goes in this unit, and they don't even bother taking the character out of the unit, and they just kind of
Yeah.
deploy it at the same time. It's like, you already know he's going to go in this unit, so I'm just going to put him down now, so I don't have to.
Okay.
Which is totally fine. Whatever.
So when a character's in a unit, they are affected by any special rules and spells and, for example, magic banners that that unit has. So if the unit has the Razor banner, then the character that is in that unit gets to have the Armor Bane 2 rule for their attacks that they make, as long as those attacks are not, for example, like casting a fireball, because that doesn't have it for a different reason. But anyway,
Okay.
if you're like just a character with, like, let's say you're playing as Dark Elves, and you have the AP -1 banner. It's Harganeth banner. The Death Hag, who joins the unit of Witch Elves who have that banner, also gets the additional AP on her attacks as well. And so that's a cool ability of joining
cool.
a unit to get the banner.
Now, Evan, can a unit be joined by more than one character?
Yeah, you can put like a million characters all in one unit, and this is called creating a Death Star.
And we'll get into that later. Now, can two characters join each other to create their own unit?
No. So you can't just have a friend and another friend hug each other and declare their undying love. They have to have you have to have at least one other regular ass guy who's hanging out.
Now, does the unit that they're joining have to have more than 5 models?
It does not have to have more than 5. It can just like, so for example, you could have a Chaos Lord on a demonic mount, which is a monstrous cavalry. He could join a single Dragon Ogre, and they could just be friends if you want.
He can, yeah, and that's totally fine. He's not going to get protected from shooting, but they could still be part of the same unit if they wanted to be.
So when they flee, whether it's like fleeing from a charge reaction, breaking and fleeing, or whatever, everyone just all goes together. So you're basically all one unit. It's almost like your character became a unit champion, if that makes it easier for you to understand. You position the character in the front rank, displacing rank and file model, not including command group. And so the command group, like if you have a full command, the command always has to go in the front. And then if you're only like say that you're playing Empire, you have 3 Empire Knights that are the command group and a character, you're either 4 wide or all the command group go in the front and the character has to sit in the back. So
yep, if the character's in the back, they're not going to get any of their benefits or abilities and such. And this was to go over that again, because a lot of people were trying to build not too long ago these Death Star units where they were trying to have where they were having a 5-man frontage, right? And they would put 3 characters unit full command. So it's like, well, the full command takes up 3 slots. You cannot have the characters displace it. So you can have at most 2 characters in the front with that command group, and then the other one has to go to the back. And if he's in the back, the next rank, it doesn't matter. Even with the new fighting rank is in 2 ranks deep, he doesn't get any of the benefits, any of the spells, any of the special. He's not going to give you all that jazz, because a lot of people were trying to do, oh, cool. Well, because the command has to go there, therefore I'll put my battle standard bearer, my cool dwarf battle standard bearer with this cool 5-up regen buff in the 2nd rank. Ha ha ha! You can't attack him because it's not in the front rank. You're not a base to base, so you can't direct any attacks against him, and I'm immune and I get all the benefits. Wrong. You do not get his benefits if you are not in the front rank.
Yeah, and
you can't displace the musician to put him in the front rank. Not a choice.
Just because people don't like the musician doesn't mean he gets to be displaced.
You could choose not to pay the points for the musician, but you cannot displace
the musician. And we're talking about a rule that's partway down, that is in the too many character section, and it's also been clarified in FAQs. So we'll get that in a bit. If there's no room, it's placed in the rear. So if there's no room in the front, you go to the rear, not anywhere else. That's interesting. You can leave a unit during the remaining move phase by simply walking away from them, and you move from wherever your model currently is. You have to like if you're gonna move 8 inches, you measure from where the guy is, and then you measure that far. That's how you go. You don't get to just teleport to the other side of the unit and then go 8 inches, right? That's not how it works.
Yep, your movement is still your movement, and people keep asking me this in tournaments all the time. Hey, let's look at this diagram below. If I have that, let's just say in diagram A, I have that a character front right. Hey, if I want to leave the unit, can I pop out and measure from anywhere? Like they want to pop out to the left of the unit? Cool. No. Do I measure his 4-inch movement from left unit? No, it's from where his model is.
Yeah.
So you move from where your position is. You don't get free extra bonus special movement. Wherever you're positioned, that's where you measure from.
And also, when you reform a unit, let's say you have a really long and wide unit with character all the way on the end, The character can reform and move by themselves to wherever you want, but the character can only go their movement times 2. So when you do a reform, if you have a unit that's like 12 models wide with the character all the way on the end, he can only go m times 2 to wherever you then end up at the end. So he can't go to the all the way to the other side. Can't do that.
Yep. How about spells? Let's go over it. Did we talk about the spells? How it
Yeah.
affects?
So the spells just
Okay.
it affects the whole unit. They all get affected. So if you have
But what if a
demonic
character
vessel,
leaves the unit?
so if you leave the unit, it stops affecting them because, for example, if it's range self, if you cast a spell on a unit and then the character leaves, it only affects the unit now. So if you cast, enchanting, not enchanting aura, earth and ramparts on a unit,
Sure.
and then you leave, the unit gets to keep it. You don't get to have it anymore.
Yep.
Okay. The really fun one though, Mike, is Steed of Shadows, because that one actually says it affects the models in a unit, not that it affects the unit, which is different. But
I know.
the vibe is that you're targeting so when the character joins a unit, the character is part of that unit. The unit's not part of the character. Does that make sense? So everything targeting this is targeting the unit. The character is just a guy who happens to be there.
Yep. It's a one-way street.
So you always measure to and from the character and use the character's like line of sight, arc for spells, for example, or command range from wherever the hell he is. You don't just get to use your inspiring presence. Like if your general is joined to a unit, you measure the 12 inches from where that guy is in the unit that he's in. You don't measure 12 inches from any single model in any part of the unit, and that's all within range.
Right. Yep.
So,
positioning.
I'm pretty sure that was how in 8th edition you just measured from his unit and just went anywhere or something like that.
Yeah, I know. 8th edition. It was a different edition, so it was just it was.
So you put your general in some big block in the middle, and then every single random guy in that extended a 12-inch range in all directions of Legion of 10.
Yeah. So it really matters now if you have a character join a unit, where in the unit are you having him position, knowing that you cannot displace the command of the unit, and the command of the unit this has to go in the center.
Yeah.
So
you determine line of sight. So from like casting fireballs, for example, or if the character has a bow, like let's say he's a glade lord with a bow that lets you shoot, that literal model has to be able to like see the target. So if he can't see, but other models can see, he doesn't just get to like, oh, but I'll displace you and I'll shoot anyway. No, like literally, you have to be the guy who gets to see.
Just to be fair, that's how shooting works anyway for everything. Shooting is on a model by model basis. If I have a unit of 10 quarrelers, and I'm shooting at Evan's unit, I measure line of sight and range model by model. It's not one guy sees the whole unit can shoot. So that's actually not really any different for that character than if you were shooting normally.
So in other words, it's not abstracted, if that makes sense. Like it's literal. You are in a certain spot. Okay, the unit moves as normal. The character model moving as part of the unit, so he stays in the same position unless you do like a reform or a redress, something like that. They always use their slowest of the whole unit. So if for some reason you put in a model in a unit where the character is now slower than everybody else, he slows them down.
Or if the character's faster than everybody else, too bad. You're going to go the slowest movement of the unit.
The most common situation there is like you're on a chariot, you're on a light chariot, like a Tomb King on his skeletal chariot, and he's movement 8, and he joins the unit of skeletal infantry, and these guys have movement 4. The unit moves 4 now.
Yeah, but you don't have to be on a chariot. You could just be a character on a mount, period.
Yeah.
I have a Goblin Wolf Rider who joins a unit of goblins. They're not going to go the goblins' 9-inch movement. They're going to go the 4-inch movement of the goblins.
Right. The most common situation where this comes up is usually the movement value is the same, but the character does not have move through cover and everyone else does, and so that ability doesn't carry over to the character, I don't think, and so he wouldn't get to have move through cover, and then all the other guys would have like let's say the Gore have movement 5, but then the like the Doom Bull has movement 6 and then drop down to movement 5, which I guess doesn't do anything, but you see what I'm saying, where it's like if you don't have move through cover and everyone else does, then you get slowed down.
Yep. There are exceptions to the rules. We just can't think of all of them off the top of our heads.
Yeah, okay. So move through the ranks. This is an ability that you use at the start of the combat phase if your character is not already in a fighting rank. You can move to a different spot that is in a fighting rank. Now, there's tons of limitations to this. In these examples, they're only showing the simplest happy situation, which is you got an orc character, he's in an orc unit, he's moving from the front rank, which is over here on the left.
Which is not the fighting rank.
To the fighting rank, which is over here on the right. He still has to go in the front. You can't just put him in the second rank and be cheeky, even though the fighting rank is now 2 ranks deep. Don't be that jerk.
No, it doesn't work. So, right, the important thing is understand the difference of the front rank of the unit, which is this is where they're facing,
Yeah.
versus the fighting rank. The fighting rank is the rank that is engaged in combat base-to-base contact with the enemy. Now, yes, in the 1.51 update, the fighting rank is 2 deep, but it is important to note this. For instance, I had a game the other day where someone had, and let's say there's a unit of orcs. Cool, they're engaged in the flank there. That's a fighting rank there, and that unit of orcs was fighting another unit of lizardmen, let's say source warriors, in their front as well. So technically, they had 2 fighting ranks
Yes, exactly.
going on at the same time. But the fighting rank, but again, at this point, he was already engaged in combat, he was in a fighting rank
Already.
front. So even though he wanted to fight go into a challenge on the flank, he couldn't because he was already in a fighting.
Okay, and this is where it comes up a lot, is the challenges. Now, when we get to challenges, the only people who are eligible to accept or deny a challenge are people who are in the opposing fighting rank. So if this Chaos Warrior unit charged in and the Chaos leader issued a challenge, then the Orc War Boss could accept it because he moved. You can choose to not move there. Because this does not happen.
We'll do a deeper dive on this.
Yeah, so the move through the ranks is mostly impactful for challenges, but you as the deciding player during that combat phase, before the challenges are issued and everything, you choose to move through the ranks if you're able. The two situations that come up are you're already stuck, so you're already fighting to the front, you get charged in the flank, you cannot move. You're already in the fighting rank, you can't go somewhere else, which also means you can't attack that way because you're literally not touching them, so you can't fight them. Or the situation comes up where you do or don't move through the ranks or whatever. Like, for example, the champions can't move through the ranks, and so then whether or not you're eligible to be in the challenge is all based on like whether or not you move through the ranks, and you can choose not to. So if this was a Faithful Wizard, the wizard does not have to move through the ranks, and if he does not move through the ranks, he is not a valid challenge acceptor or refuser because he's not over there.
So we'll go more into this later, but the main point is moving through the ranks is a rule set to help a character primarily get into combat if their unit gets flank charged or something.
Something like that.
And that's the primary use of it. The secondary use of it is how it affects challenges, but we will cover challenges in a separate video.
Okay, so if a character's in a unit, when they shoot, they have to shoot their weapons at the same target, other than magic missiles and vortexes.
This makes so many people sad all the time. I get asked this question all the time. I want to shoot a different target.
You can't do that.
Nope. Can't do that. You have to back towards our example. Why might you want to be a lone character outside a unit so you could shoot a different target?
Yeah, a great example of this is you have a handmaiden of the Everqueen. She has the bow of the Seafarer, which is like a strength 6 or strength 5 bow with AP3 multi wounds. That bow, when she joins a unit of Sisters of Avalorn, they all have to fire at the same target. So the Sisters of Avalorn with their strength 3 AP1 arrows all have to shoot at, let's say, a bunch of Goblin Cavalry, and so does the Handmaiden. She doesn't get to just fire her one arrow at somebody else. They all fire the same thing.
Yep, but the exception is magic missiles and vortexes, which is most often the case where, cool, my wizard's in this unit with guns or ranged weapons or whatever, they're going to shoot where they're going to shoot, and my wizard's going to go blast something else. So the wizards still get to blast their magic missiles and vortexes at their targets.
Yeah, I kind of wish this wasn't the case because it does create a build where, for example, you have 4 or 5 wizards with magic missiles all sitting in the front rank of a unit, and they all just get to go, great, I get 3 magic missiles each. I'm just going to shoot at any different target I freaking feel like with my +2 to cast because we're all standing next to the guy with the magic item.
You're not wrong. Like, pros and cons at the same time. If that one unit gets tagged into melee combat, no wizards are shooting any spells. So
yeah, that's true.
Pros and cons.
In the meantime, you have a machine gun bunker, which is weird.
Yep, but that again was one of the early meta big threats, but has very much not been a top table meta threat in quite some time, but still not necessarily fun to play against.
This is more just when you're a dwarf or you're a wood elf, you're like, so I don't get to be cool, and you're like, no, you don't.
Feels bad for those. Feels bad, yeah. So, but anyway, let's.
That's why the Thane with the like multi D3 hit gun guy, he runs around by himself, so he can shoot at whatever he feels like by himself.
Bang, 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 bang. Yeah. It feels rough.
Okay, but that's just how it works. So that's we play it that way. We don't play it wrong. When people are shooting at you, you don't get hit by any attacks unless if you're getting sniped by either there's two things in the game that can do this: the Way Watcher or the Empire
Huckland
Long Rifle. Those are two things that can pick out a guy and try to shoot at you. Even when they do that, you get a Lookout Sir roll, so it's pointless.
Mm-hmm. As long as there's 5 or more models.
Yeah, which there very often are, so it's
Almost
pointless.
Always. Yes, I know, but it is what it is.
The Waystalker is like 70-point character, and he's pointless. Okay,
I don't know what to tell you. I don't know why they made that choice.
The FAQ was dumb. All right, they find themselves lying underneath the template. So if you have a stone thrower or something, or it's scatters, and they land underneath it, they get hit. They can still Lookout Sir that too.
Yep. But you still have a chance of hitting them, and you roll that die because those ones come up.
Yes,
I think they will.
Well, and for example, for all intents and purposes, a cannonball bouncing is a template. So it's the same. If a cannonball bounces through a character, you can do that. They get to Lookout Sir. If they fail, they're 2 up. They get hurt. Otherwise, some other random guy gets hurt.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And or you can also kill so many of them that there aren't 5 guys left, and then cannonball to your heart's content.
Yeah, and that's the most common thing is you whittle a unit down that a character is hiding into. There's less than 5 models beyond the character. That doesn't include the character. It's not 4 models plus the characters. The character plus 5 other models. You whittle them down, that now the character could just be targeted directly.
This is why having very high burst damage shooting can be incredibly meta defining, because your Hierophant is a guy on foot in a unit of 30 skeletons. If I can somehow kill 24 of them, or 26 of them in one turn very easily, great. Then I can fire 4 cannonballs into the Hierophant and he's dead.
Yep.
Okay, it's a really good thing, Mike, that there's nothing in the game that kills 26 skeletons in one turn. All right.
For now.
No, I'm alluding to lanterns again.
Stay focused. Stay on target.
Stay on target. All right. Lookout Sir. We alluded to this already. If you do get hit and there's 5 or more models on a 2+, some other guy gets hit instead. This is a really important rule that's not very easy to forget. The only part that's easy to forget is that it takes 5 models. So if you have a Chaos Lord on a demonic steed and he joins 4 Dragon Ogres and they run around by themselves, cool. He gets to have no protection against cannonballs then. They can just hit him in the face.
Yep. So that 2-up Lookout Sir save, very important. We've all seen it in movies, right? When it's going to get hit by a bus or a train and someone jumps, look out, and they protect them and they get hit instead.
Yeah. This is basically plot armor, but also it helps solve the problem of, well, why can't I just put a cannonball directly on top of your head and then I just snipe people with it when then you can't because of this.
That feels super bad.
Yeah, so this is... I would also think that you could just change cannons to be work like a bolt thrower, but that's a hot take. All right.
Different topic.
Is it?
Yes. Okay. Stay on target. We're almost there, Evan. We're almost there.
Okay.
Keep going.
When the characters are in combat, if they're not in the fighting rank, they can move through the ranks, which is what they alluded to before. In step 1.1, which is before issue challenges but after before impact hits and all that stuff, it's choose and fight. So it's like before the fight even starts, we get to run over there and join the fight. Cool. But only if you're not in the fighting rank. The other situation is really common, Mike, is I've got a character and he's on the side of the unit because he's not in the middle, and you charge into the middle, and now my character is in the fighting rank, but he's not base to base, and he cannot move through the ranks then, which sucks.
Nope. Positioning. It matters a whole bunch where you put your unit, where you put your character models within the unit. Pay attention.
Yeah. So you can challenge in that case, but you can't actually swing.
It's also a penalty for having, again, those very wide units. You want those very wide units so you get more supporting attacks. But now if you want to protect your character by putting him on the sides, he can potentially not get into combat. So again, a lot of depth, a lot of strategy to the game.
Unless if you're Skaven, where all of your characters can just be in the back rank and then move through the ranks to exactly where they feel like
being. Skaven thing.
Yeah.
Okay, that we could do a whole.
They get to basically just zoom in and out to the front rank and then zoom back. It's great.
Well, they're dirty rats. What do you want from them? Moving on.
Okay, so the number of attacks they make is highly dependent on this, because if they're in the fighting rank but not in base to base, they make 1 attack. And so your Doom Bull with a Black Maul, instead of making 6 plus D6 attacks, he makes 1.
Yep. He still gets to use his magic weapon and all his stats and everything, but only 1 attack because he is supporting. So being in base to base when you have more than 1 attack is critical.
Yeah. You can direct your attacks against models and have direct attacks directed against you when you are in the fighting rank and in the front. So
Let's say that one more time.
you can
This is
direct
really
attacks
important.
against enemies and have attacks directed against you when your character is in that fighting rank. So when people are base to base with them, they can direct attacks into you. So when you have a wizard in the front rank and an enemy unit of spearmen walks up, you're like, ah ha ha, you're horrible spearmen. 3 or 4 of those guys can be like, no, I'm going to try to poke your wizard. And maybe they actually just
Hmm.
hurt him because he's probably an elf wizard and he's toughness 3, or at least that's my daily
Yep.
situation.
Or again, hey, you have your melee character. You know
Yeah.
what? I have 2 guys that are in base contact with him. Diagonals count as base. I'm going to direct those 2 versus him. That's the max I'm allowed to allocate, and the rest of my unit will.
Yeah.
So it matters. It matters a whole bunch. Positioning and who's in base to base, because they can get, while they were protected ish from ranged attacks, it's not going to help them once you get into thick of melee. If they're in base, anyone who's in base to base, you're getting punched in the face.
Also, none of the attacks overflow onto them if the rest of the unit got killed. So if you,
It's important.
so they do overflow onto a champion, but they do not overflow onto a character. So if you rolled a hit and wound all of these random skeletons next to the vampire count lord, and you kill 33 skeletons, even though there's only 25 in the unit, the 8 remaining attacks just get wasted. So hey, maybe you should have
Mhm.
directed some of that into the.
Now, what if it was the other way around? What if I did 31 wounds to that 4 wound vampire lord?
Oh
Do
no,
they carry over to the rest of the unit?
that's just called being rude. But no, they don't carry over either
So there's
direction.
no spillover either way. Whatever you direct, I'm directing attacks to the unit or
Yeah.
to this character in base to base. It doesn't matter how many wounds you do. You can't overkill them. You're not a challenge. The extra wounds are just lost.
Which this shouldn't be that hard to figure out because it basically works the exact same way as if you had 2 different units in base combat and then the guys were choosing between 2 different units to attack. It's just that now they're in one blob. That's all.
Yep.
Okay. Can only have impact hits or stomps directed against them if there are less than 5 or fewer models. So you can attack regular attacks against them, but impact hits or stomps do not get to be directed against a character unless there's 5 or more guys. So when you have a vampire lord at the front rank of a bunch of skeletons, as long as there's 5 skeletons, you don't get hit by 6, impact hits, right, or
Hmm.
stomp attacks from a
Yep.
dragon.
Yep. Yep. And very important. And again, this is also a rule that people often forget. And again, this is one of the things in the community that constantly comes up with impact hits now, because they happen before the initiative step. Are you allowed to direct impact hits versus a champion? Some communities are ruling yes, some communities no. In our community, rolling yes, you can. But again, to target that character, what does it say here? There has to be fewer than 5 rank and
So
fire
for a character, it's
models.
fewer than 5. Champions have no such protection. Ergo, with the way the rules are now, you can actually charge a chariot. Like, let's say you have a prince on a chariot, and he charges into an enemy unit, and the other guy's like, "Ah, I will challenge you with my character, and I'll automatically win on combat res, even if you get max overkill." And you say, "No, you won't, because I'm going to use my 5 impact hits. I'm going to direct all of them against the champion just to make that not happen."
So make sure you check with your local community how this is being ruled,
Yeah,
how
because
this
it
is
is a
being
bit weird.
played. Different communities will do it different ways. GW has not clarified this in the FAQ, and that's definitely a contentious topic depending on the community you're playing in.
Okay, now here's the rule we were alluding to before. Too many characters. So unless you contain a single rank, the fighting rank can't contain more characters than rank and file. So if you want to stick 5 goblin bosses into the front rank of a unit of night goblins, cool. You have to have a 10 wide unit then, because you have to have more rank and file, or greater than or equal to, than the
Hmm.
characters to have them in there. So you cannot
Hmm.
have it. Very commonly in 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy, you had a unit of like 5 Bretonnian paladins were all joined to a single unit of Knights of the Realm, and all of the paladins were
Yeah.
just in the front, like multiple. They're all just standing there, like
People were
you
creating
fighting a
these
whole
Death
unit of
Star
paladins.
units.
Yeah, but
Yep.
you can't do that anymore.
Nope, not as much. And again, we saw a lot of people getting this wrong more last year in particular, with in particular the Pegasus Knight unit, where they would take like 3 Pegasus Knights, and then they would take like, they try to put 4, 3, or 3 plus,
Yeah.
a Duke and a Paladin and a Sorcerer, like, and they would just try to double, triple down on the characters in the front rank on the Pegasus Knights and such, depending on the different format. You can't. There are rules that restrict this. Please read these rules carefully. Also, please stop making Death Star units. It's not fun for anybody. Focus on having fun and growing the community. Stop trying to make Death Star units.
Yeah, they'll stop making Death Star units when either break tests become more unreliable or the victory points table gets changed. Okay.
You're not wrong. And players are going to, to try to maximize the system to their advantage. And there are, to be fair to GW, there are a way more rules that restrict and reduce and mitigate Death Star units than in the past in this edition. So, applause to them, but there are still more scenarios where you can get into a Death Star unit situation than I think anybody would like in this edition. So hopefully continue to address that.
Where this will come up a lot is you have a Bretonnian Duke and a Paladin, both on Royal Pegasus, joined to Peg Knights. If the Pegasus Knights and these characters charge in there, and their fighting rank is only 3 models, they can't have 2 characters and 1 regular guy. That cannot happen. So the Duke and 2 regular Pegasus Knights go into the front, and the other regular guy, the other character, has to go to the back. That's what it says. It says you have to retire. When you retire, you move through the ranks to take a position away from the fighting rank. You can't make attacks or have attacks directed against you, and you confer no bonuses whatsoever. You're basically not even there.
Yep.
And remember, this is going to happen randomly and unpredictably because when you're a skirmisher, you rank up to whoever you're charging. So, you can't predict how many models wide you have. And this is one reason why people are now no longer running a Paladin and a Duke all in the same unit with a bunch of Pegasus, because you actually just have no idea what the hell's going to happen. You don't know what's so it's unpredictable.
Yep.
Now, if you have one character,
this way less.
When you have one character, you're basically always fine because you're always going to have that one character and one other rank and file model. You're good, so you're chill, right?
Yep.
So you're fine. It's only when this rule only happens when you have 3 or 4 or 5, especially in skirmishers where it all gets weird.
All right, moving on.
And finally, I think because the next section is challenges, we'll cover that in a different video. Excess wounds don't spill over. We already talked about that. So you have to, if you have a character and then 3 other ogres and they're all standing there in the front rank, you got to direct attacks. Some of them might get wasted. That's how it works.
Yep. All right, cool. All right, there we go. We got through the second part, lone characters, and next time we will cover challenges.
Yeah, and there's been a mountain of FAQs about this one, so this one will be... And to be honest, this is a huge relevant impact to the game, and getting it right is very important because getting it wrong will lead to massive feel bad and being like, really? Is that how it works? And no, it doesn't. That's not how it works. So,
yep. We'll cover that next time.
Anyway, stay tuned for that, everybody, and also stay legendary and see us in the Discord. And you can constantly ping me and ask me questions about your army list, and I will probably answer you.
All right. Please do like, share, and subscribe. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.